everybody, I'm Susan Mulvihill from Susan's in the Garden. For my February 2nd garden column, I wrote about winter sowing, and that involves sowing seeds outdoors in the dead of winter. Now you probably think I'm nuts for even discussing this. Here I am in zone 5B, we've got snow all over the place. There's no way that could work, right? Well, today I'm going to talk about what it is and how to do it. So what is winter sowing anyway, and why would you even want to try it? Well, there's a lot of very good reasons, as you'll see in a moment. But first of all, the concept of winter sowing is that you are planting seeds in containers that you've prepared and putting them outdoors where they are exposed to the elements such as rain, snow, hail, the temperatures, which can be very, very cold, especially in my zone 5B garden, and also the differing amounts of sunlight that take place during winter days. And what happens is that they determine the right timing and temperature to germinate. And so they're going to be growing in this container all on their own. Now, if you think about seed starting indoors, first of all, you have to pick the right time to start your seeds. You don't want to start them way too early or way too late. You need space under a grow light, let's say. You need just the room in your house for pots and so on. You might have to up-pot the seedlings, usually you do, and then you need room for those, and you have to fuss over the seedlings. So in this case, the seeds in our containers that we put outdoors are getting watered by Mother Nature, and we don't have to do a thing about them until it's almost time to plant them. Now, other things that I like about it, if you start seeds indoors, there is a nasty fungal disease called damping-off syndrome, and that can wipe out a flat of seedlings if there's not good air circulation around them. Well, you're not going to have that problem with winter sowing. Also, you don't have to go through the hardening-off process where you're slowly exposing your seedlings that you started indoors to the sunlight and the temperatures before you get to plant them out in the garden. All of this happens all on its own, which is awesome. So I really like this method, and I'm very excited about showing it to you today. One of the things I like about winter sowing is that you really don't need any special equipment at all. You should start out with some kind of a container that is fairly clear. You could use a milk jug or a water jug. You could use a pop bottle. Make sure you cut the label off. And then you're going to need some type of a cutting implement, whether it's a box cutter, scissors, or a knife, to make holes and also to cut the containers, which I'll show you in a moment. Please promise me that you will not cut yourself. You're also going to need some type of marker that is waterproof, so you can label your containers and then you know what it is when you are planting them in the spring. You're going to need some type of tape, whether it's a duct tape or masking tape, and that is to tape the container back together. Again, I'll show you that in a moment. And then you need potting soil. You really need to use a sterile potting mix. Do not buy a potting soil that contains fertilizers or those water-retaining polymers which help save water. You don't want anything fancy, just plain old potting mix. It needs to be light and fluffy. It also should be slightly moistened as you get going. Do not use garden soil. It can be very heavy, get waterlogged, and also it can contain some pathogens. So potting soil is the way to go. Now, one last thing you're obviously going to need is seeds. And you'll recall my article on winter sowing is going to appear on February 2nd, and you can find it on my website's blog starting on that date. The story contains all kinds of ideas of vegetable, herb, annual, and perennial seeds that you can start using the winter sowing method. And I'll make sure that there is additional information on my blog. But there is also a website called wintersown.org that has extensive lists of all of these types of plants. So it will give you some good ideas of things you can plant. But basically the winter sowing method with the freezing and the thawing, the cold and so on, is going to break down the seed coat, and that's what helps with the germination. So I took a milk jug, and what I did was I used some scissors to cut it around almost the whole way except for where the handle is. So that's about 1.5 inches or so that's still attached to the bottom half of this milk jug. And the whole reason that you're making this cut is because you need to be able to put the potting soil in here and to plant your seeds. So this will just flip back on, and then this gets taped back together once you have everything planted. But the other thing you have to do to prepare your container is to put some holes in the top and in the bottom. So the ones in the top are for rain and snow and hail to get in there to keep the soil moist. And these, of course, are drainage holes so that this whole thing doesn't fill up with water during the course of the winter. You definitely need it to drain. If you're using a pop bottle, I would cut up about 5 inches from the bottom and go around either all the way, knowing you're going to tape the whole thing back together once your soil is in and your seeds are planted, or I would cut like the milk jug, where I leave a little bit of a hinge for the top to connect to the bottom. And again, you absolutely must put in holes in the top and drainage holes in the bottom. Now it's time to put the soil in, and what you're looking for is a depth of about 3 to 4 inches of the potting soil. And so I have got the holes in the bottom here and in the top, plus I'm going to leave the lid off. But the other thing I wanted to point out is it seems like if you're cutting the milk jugs, it's only about 4 inches, so you're going to end up with about 3.5 inches of potting soil inside. I lightly moisten this just to get things going. I've found if you start with dry mix, it's really hard to get moistened after the fact. So it's better to start out with lightly moistened soil. Okay, so that gives me a pretty nice depth. Now for small seeds, you're going to want to sprinkle them on the top. You either don't have to cover them, or you could cover them with a little bit of soil, and I would go by what the seed packet says. If it says 1/4 inch, put on about 1/4 inch of soil. I'm going to plant some onion seeds in this container. And when it comes to sowing seeds, you can sow them pretty thickly, because the concept is that you're going to be teasing apart the seedlings in the spring to plant them in your garden. So I'm just going to sprinkle them onto the soil surface. Since they seem to be coated with something, I'm just going to put about 1/4 inch of soil on top of them and then just press it in. And then I'm going to give them a little bit of a drink, and that is to make good contact between the seed and the soil. One other thing I'm going to do is to put a little plant tag inside that says what is planted in here, just on the off chance that somehow the label gets washed off the outside of the container during the winter. I'm going to use something that is supposed to be waterproof, but this is just a little added insurance so I know what I've got in here. Now I'm going to tape each container's top to its bottom. There, that's almost a two-person job, so you might want to recruit somebody. The final step is to move your containers to their winter home, and that means anywhere that is open and gets plenty of sunlight and moisture. You do not want to put the containers under the eaves of a house or under any kind of a shelter, because that will block the light and things like rain and snow. This is very important. I've put mine on the south side of my veggie garden where I think they'll have lots of light and lots of moisture. So what happens next? Well, really not a whole lot of anything, and that's the beauty of winter sowing. But when most of the seeds have germinated, what you're going to do is cut a little window into the side of your container, and that is to give additional air circulation to them. And once the plants have pretty much filled the inside of the container, then it's time to transplant them out into your garden. Now, just to give you some ideas of seeds that are ideal for using in winter sowing, for annuals, you can do calendulas, Canterbury bells, celosia, cosmos, marigolds, morning glories, nicotiana, petunias, poppies, snapdragons, strawflowers, and sunflowers. For perennials, you could do baptisia or false indigo, black-eyed Susan, butterfly weed, coneflowers, blanket flowers, liatris, obedient plant, and sedum. For vegetables, you could do members of the allium family, so that would be things like leeks, onions, and shallots, arugula, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collard greens, endive, kale, kohlrabi, lettuce, pak choi, peas, radicchio, radish, spinach, and Swiss chard. For herbs, you could do chives, cilantro, dill, lavender, oregano, mint, parsley, sage, summer savory. So there are all kinds of things, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So are you ready to try your hand at winter sowing? I sure hope so, and I would love to hear what you've planted and how it works for you. I'll see you next time around, and happy winter gardening.